Hey guys, if I can get your attention, we're going to have our guest introduce himself and get started so that we can get on here.
All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So today, we're going to talk about railroad crossing safety. My name is Matt Vogt. I'm a captain over at the Valley Center Police Department, and I'm Sarah's brother. So I do claim her.
Finally, somebody did.
Yeah, I know, right? So yeah, they asked me to come out here today because kind of my background, I've been with the department since 1993. Started as a police explorer and worked my way up from there. So, been doing the Operation Lifesaver program for almost 20 years, 19 years now. And we'll get a little bit into what that program is about. I wear several different hats with the organization. I'm the board president for Kansas. I do programs like this. I'm also a railroad investigation safety course instructor for law enforcement and other first responders. So, kind of been my wheelhouse thing because I kind of decided, I've been into train since I was a kid as a hobby, and what more better thing to incorporate your hobby into work to make it a little more fun. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Because the Operation Lifesaver program is a rail safety education program. It's been around total for 52 years, in Kansas for 50 years this year. And so we do programs for all age groups about railroad crossing safety and also trespassing prevention on railroad property. And so that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is specifically when it comes to school bus and railroad crossing specifically. So to get started into this, the national average, about every 3 hours, there is a collision between a train and a motor vehicle, or a train and a pedestrian, or even a trespasser. And we'll talk about what the difference is about that. So, does anybody in here not have a smartphone? Anybody? Okay, got one. There's a few holdouts out there, but whether or not you're on social media or not, we get news apps and stuff, so it's kind of like we get to see the news pretty much as it happens within minutes. And so we see these unfortunate stories all the time of, vehicles been hit by a train or a pedestrian or a trespasser, and majority of the time that's a fatality. There's a death involved in those incidents. So we see these unfortunate news stories here that we're hopefully trying to prevent those. And so what we say is that any time is train time, and why that is because trains don't run on any kind of a set schedule. As you guys cross numerous railroad crossings over in this part of Wichita, do you ever see a train? Yes and no, okay? Yeah, because the K&O runs through Mays over here. Yeah, their train frequency is not very high, and a lot of times it's at night, but your activities take you all across the state, which you may be running across other more active train lines. So trains don't run any kind of a set schedule. They're out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, holidays, good weather, bad weather, whatever it may be. And so that's where a lot of people just get complacent, where they may travel a certain route every day going to work or school. They may go across a railroad crossing and they may never see a train there. And it's that one day that they come across the crossing, the gates come down, the lights are on, and they got to be malfunctioned. I've never seen a train here before. And it's that day that, oh yeah, there is. So this puts you inside the cab of a locomotive, and so commonly a lot of people think that trains have steering wheels, but they do not. Like, why didn't the train, swerve out of the way to miss me? They don't have a steering wheel, so they can only follow the train tracks out in front of them, because you have the engineer on the right, the conductor on the left, and so the only thing he can do is make it go and make it stop. And so a lot of the reason of why we have to yield the right-of-way to trains is because of the stopping distance. So your average motor vehicle from 55 mile an hour can stop in about 200 feet. Then we get into a school bus, about 230 feet. Then we get into a semi-truck, That can take around 300 feet, so that's the length of a football field. A light rail passenger train in about 600 to 900 feet. And then we get into the large freight trains that can be, 12 million pounds, can take up to a mile or more to stop. Trains that run specifically on the BNSF railway through Wichita, it's not uncommon for them to be 16,000 feet long. That's over 3 miles in length. So think of all the weight that's there and how long it takes it to stop. So even though trains can stop, it's just they can't stop as quickly as we can, so hence that's why we have to yield the right-of-way. So that's like 18 football fields now it takes them to stop. So trains are heavy, of course, so we like to use the reference between a car and a pop can. The weight differential between those two is 4,000 to 1, so it takes like 4,000 pop cans to equal the weight of a car. And that's the same versus a car versus a train. It kind of has the same effect. And even a single locomotive by itself can do that. I mean, they've done demonstrations over the years, just, a pair of locomotives together doing a staged crash and can do that same amount of damage and kill somebody. So we'll talk a little bit about crossing over tracks safely. So if your vehicle became stalled on the tracks in a crossing like this, what do you think is the first thing you should do? Get out. Get out. Okay, that's very good. Get everybody out. Specifically, of course, if you're going to be in a school bus, you've got an evacuation plan to take care of. Who would you call for help in the event of that emergency? Any ideas? Okay, call 911 or call your transportation dispatch, or who else might you call? Call the railroad. Very good. So of course we want to talk about getting out, get a safe distance away from the tracks even if you don't see a train. Locate the blue and white emergency notification system signs. So we're going to have some stickers I'm going to give everybody. So I encourage you to put these in your bus somewhere if you're allowed to. That way you can see that. It's kind of a reminder of what to look for. And next time you go by a railroad crossing, look for that sign. So that sign has the emergency phone number for the railroad that operates that track, and then has what's called a crossing ID number or a DOT number. That's like the address for that railroad crossing. Because if you tell them I'm at 53rd in Mays, Kansas, they're probably not going to know where you are. Even though, yeah, you are calling actually Wichita. Their dispatch center for KNO's here in Wichita. But if you say call BNSF, that I'm at Main Street Valley Center, you're calling Fort Worth, Texas. So they're not going to know where may know where Valley Center, Kansas is, or where Main Street is. So that's why it's important to get that DOT number. And I know Valley Center's school district, their bus folks, they've got a list of all the crossings in their area. It's got the DOT number listed, so it kind of makes it a little handier if they call into their dispatch. Hey, I'm at this crossing. They can look it up on their list and call it in if there's an emergency or like a crossing malfunction, or they see that something's broke. So they can also use that number to report that as well. So if there is a train approaching, this is where they say to recommend to go. So you're kind of running on a 45-degree angle away, but in the direction that the train is coming from. So it kind of is a little confusing to some folks, but that's what that arrow dictates or demonstrates. That way you're not hit by the flying debris when the train hits the vehicle, because it will be like a bomb going off. There'll be tires and glass, and anything that breaks loose will go flying in the air. You don't want to get hit by that stuff. So again, that's a closer up view of the ENS sign, the emergency phone number, and then the crossing ID. And you can also use that too, if you see somebody trespassing on railroad property. That gives an approximation of where that person might be at. If you can't look at it, call 911.
Stuck on the railroad crossing? Get out of your vehicle. For help, call the number on the blue and white emergency notification system sign at the crossing. Give them a crossing number to alert train traffic. Remember, find the blue and white to save your life.
And even that information could save the life of another, and I'll give a little bit of a story of one day that I also farm a little bit. One day I was going out to cut some hay and crossed 5th Street in Valley Center, and I see this guy on the sidewalk walking up to the tracks, and he stands in the middle of the tracks. And he's got a cigarette in one hand and a lighter in the other. And he just stays there, and then he sits down. But this can't be good. So I called a couple of my officers over there. They came and contacted this guy. His intent was to sit there and wait for a train to kill himself. So you see stuff like that near a railroad crossing on a railroad property, good idea to call it in, because it could save a life. We'll talk about a couple different types of crossings. First being a passive crossing. So passive crossings have no lights or gates. It's just a cross buck by itself. Notice you'll see the advanced warning sign there, so that typically is within 100 feet of advance of the crossing to warn you that there is a crossing ahead, and you should be prepared to stop and yield the right-of-way to any trains. If it's a paved road, you may have the pavement markings. Then notice you got the double yellow line there. So double yellow line means what? No passing zone. So you don't want to be passing within 100 feet of the crossing. Typically it's going to be a double yellow line anyway. So again, there's no lights or gates at a passive crossing. You're just going to have the crossbuck. And then on a paved road, you may have a stop line there, like you do at crosswalks. So that's going to be no closer than 15 feet from the nearest rail, which that's about the length of a car. So that's kind of the reference you can use if you come across a crossing that does not have a stop line, or it's a rural crossing with a dirt road. And typically you're going to stop no closer than 15 feet, but no further than 50. And that's even in state law. Typically it's within that range that gives you the best sight distance in either direction to see down the tracks. However, you may have buildings, trees, farm crops, other vegetation. It may be the way that the road and the tracks intersect each other can impede your vision, which that's a pretty common thing around here. So, and that's probably one of my biggest things that bus drivers tell me about is, well, I can't see. So, if it's something with vegetation or whatever, might, contact whoever the roadway authority is in that area, see if they can maybe take that, cut that back a little bit. So if you run across an active warning device now that has just flashing lights, we have to treat that just like a stop sign, and you have to stop and not only proceed if it's safe to do so. Again, remember, trains always have the right-of-way. So now we'll incorporate the gates. So if the gates are down, that temporarily closes the roadway. The only exception that will allow you to drive around down railroad gates is law enforcement or railroad employees. But a lot of crossings that are really small like that, you wouldn't be able to get a bus through them anyway. And one thing I also want to recommend or caution you about is that we do not lift gates up to get you through either. We won't do that. That can damage the gates, actually, the mechanisms in them. It doesn't show it much in the new video we show, but in the old one they talk about where they had bus drivers that were letting kids off and push the gate up so they could get through. Big no-no. Needless to say, those bus drivers no longer have a job. So
I ran into a situation where only one of the arms was down.
that's probably a malfunction, yeah. So if it's a malfunction and you can, get through, or they direct you through, then yeah, that does happen occasionally. Multiple track signs. So another big thing you got to be looking for out there is multiple tracks. If you're crossing more than one, it's going to have that little upside down T sign that says 2, 3, 4, whatever it might be. Or like, 29th and Broadway in Wichita, you're crossing 14 because you're going right through the middle of BNSF's yard. So that's why you got to always expect a train on any track going in any direction at any point in time. And so this is where a lot of people have ended up being killed in situations like this, where train number 1 goes through, and then somebody's in such a big hurry that as soon as that last car clears the crossing, they're driving around the gates. And then what they don't see or hear is the train on the other track that may be obscured by the first train. And so people have been killed, been seriously injured in those types of crashes. I wish I could show it, but I do have a video I showed of my law enforcement folks. They were running hot with lights and siren to a medical emergency, sheriff's deputy in Texas. Last car clears, he goes through the gates, gets hit by the second train, his vehicle gets rolled numerous times. Luckily he lived. But that's why, even though, you know, we can break the speed limit, we can run stop signs, run the lights and sirens, we aren't going to do that. That's a big safety issue there. So, again, making sure that the gates are fully up and lights are off before you go through the crossing, because if they're in the process of going up or down, that's technically a violation. You can be written a ticket for it. I will bring up about crossbucks. So how do you get a violation if you're at a crossbuck and there's no gates? Any idea? Okay, so if there's a train approaching, the key thing is if they have started to blow the horn and you drive through the crossing, that's a violation, because you're considered in hazardous proximity and you can be written a ticket for it. So as long as they've started blowing their horn, if you hear the horn, you better stop and wait. Quiet zones. So we'll see these in different areas of the country. There are some here in Kansas. Belle Plaine has one. Dodge City has one. I think they've got one up in Olathe. So quiet zones are basically where the trains do not sound their horns at the railroad crossings. So how do you know when a train's approaching? Well, what they have done, of course they have lights and gates there, but they'll typically add a median barrier in the middle of the road to keep people from driving around the gates. And of course it's posted, says no train horn. Sometimes they'll have 4 gates instead of just 2, so it totally blocks off the road. There are some areas that have what are called wayside horns. They have some of these here in Wichita on the K&O Railroad, actually. At Walker and McLean, there is a wayside horn. They also got some on the corridor near Lincoln and Santa Fe, St. Francis Streets over in there. So if your travels take you through there, you may see that. They just have horns on the crossing mast that sounds out towards traffic. They're not near as loud as a locomotive horn. Because like I say, a lot of people complain. That's one of my biggest things I hear in Valley Center all the time. All those trains, all night to the hour, you know. So again, if you see those, be aware of those. Look at the FRA's website for more information. So speed misperception. So just like the giant aircraft that we see fly over all the time, does it look like they're going very fast? No, trains are no different. Especially when you get out in the country and you've got a unobscured view of a train approaching. Can you really judge how fast it is going? Because sometimes it's the bigger the vehicle that looks like it's going slower than it really is. Because when we're running traffic enforcement, we kind of have that same thing. We see a vehicle, yeah, it looks like it's moving pretty fast. And then we check it on radar, oh, it's just because it's something bigger and it just, looks like it is. But trains are no different than that. That's where a lot of people out in the country, in those rural crossings, have tried to beat the train to the crossing, and then they get hit because they misjudge the speed and approach rate. 3 don'ts we'll talk about. One, of course, we have the no passing on railroad crossings, and then shifting gears. So how many in here can drive a stick shift? Lots of us. So it's funny when I do driver's ed courses, I might get 2 or 3 hands that raise their hands in those. But so think back when you first learned how to drive a stick shift. What was probably one of the biggest problems you always had? Stalling it out. You killed the engine. So you learned how much gas and how to let the clutch out and all that. So that's why leave it in gear, get through the crossing, then you can shift gears so you don't take that chance of stalling it out. And of course, don't stop on the tracks. So we talked about not only the front of your vehicle being in the clear by 15 feet, but now we also want to make sure the rear of your vehicle is clear by 15 feet. Because there are crossings, out here in our area Derby, North Wichita is probably the biggest examples of, where you've got traffic intersections and there's a railroad crossing right by it. And if you pull up to that line, well, is the rear vehicle in the clear? So always like walk the length of your bus so you're kind of familiar with that and kind of have reference points with your mirror so you kind of know, okay, how far away is it? Am I going to be okay or not? Because the longer the bus, why the more potential you've got for that issue. So we'll talk about overhang. So a lot of people think that the gauge of the rail is how wide the train locomotives and cars are. Well, that's not true. They can overhang each side of the rail by 3 or 4 feet. And so sometimes it can be wider than that if they're carrying larger loads. The 737 fuselages they carry by rail are a little bit wider. So, but they will use cables, chains, other things to secure those type of things onto the car. Sometimes those things break loose. If you're standing too close, you can be hit by those things and it could hurt you very badly or it could even kill you. So that's why even with pedestrians, we talk about being at least 15 feet away from the tracks as well. Stopping distance. So can anybody tell me what it means to overdrive your headlights?
Going too fast to see how far your headlights can see.
Okay, you're close. I'm looking for another key ingredient in that. Any ideas?
The bright, maybe?
Okay, road conditions, brightness, braking. So it's your stopping distance. So if you're driving faster than you can stop within the distance of your headlights, you're overdriving your headlights. So that comes into a big factor when you're driving in fog, snow, rain, those types of conditions, smoke. Because we had the big fire yesterday, it was kind of causing a lot of smoke issues. If you drive on the turnpike, they do the range burning in the spring. So overdriving your headlights, driving too fast for the conditions, this can result in a collision of a train that's already occupying a crossing. This happens a lot more frequently than you think. Had one happen last year, down in actually Sedgwick County was working this, drunk driver. And the train never knew that anybody hit him.
Oh, wow.
He hit the third locomotive at the front end, and by the time they got things figured out, the train was in Valley Center, and we had to help them investigate it, take pictures, and get true statements. They never knew anything hit them. So, impaired driving is a big thing with that. Watch for advanced warning signs, slow down, be prepared to stop, always expect a train. So that brings up another point is distractions. So, of course, texting and driving, talking on the phone, multitasking, avoid driving if you're tired or impaired. Even, over-the-counter meds can make you tired. If you're taking NyQuil at the wrong time of day, then that's going to be a problem. Allergy meds can make you sleepy. That's why they got all those warnings on their boxes. Keeping your attention to the road. But of course, you guys are bus drivers. What is your biggest distraction? All them kids. Sure. And of course, those of us that have our own kids that, even, they're in the back seat fussing, fighting or whatever, and we've seen some new stories lately. There was a story lately I think I read about where they think it was a gal that got into a crash and it was a distracted driving incident. So, we'll also talk about light rail and streetcars, because Oklahoma City and Kansas City both have streetcar operations, and a lot of people, of course, from this area like to go down to those cities, for the weekend or for the day to visit their attractions and everything. But we like to show this visual just to make people aware of that. If you're in those areas, to be aware of the streetcars around, and pay attention to the signs of where they tell you to park. And make sure that you're parking your vehicle in the clear so you're not too close to their tracks and getting hit. This illustrates about pushing your bicycles across a crossing or using the designated crosswalks. Not only do we have distracted drivers, but we got distracted pedestrians out there, believe it or not. And That's been kind of a hot topic lately with all of the pedestrian fatalities that have happened recently. I know our city's kind of had some things about that lately too, of, you know, okay, are they crossing in a crosswalk? If you're not, well then you have to use the right of way to the oncoming traffic. So, and why we recommend pushing bikes, so that way you don't, some of them crossings can be kind of rough, we don't want people falling off and getting hurt. And so that's usually what we tell all the kids that may ride bikes on a regular basis. And of course, you shouldn't be running after a streetcar. This isn't San Francisco, so. So trespassing. So we talk about trespassing because in the last about 10 years or so, we've started to see more death and injury due to trespassing incidents than motor vehicle crashes. So, can anybody tell me what's it mean to trespass?
Walking on the tracks themselves,
Okay,
wherever you're at.
okay.
Being on somebody else's property
Being on somebody else's property. Okay, I'm looking at another key word though.
without permission?
Without permission. So the railroads are not going to give you permission. So whether you see a no trespassing sign or not. Again, if you're on somebody else's property without their permission. But trespassing on railroad property in Kansas is what they call a misdemeanor offense, which means you could be arrested for it and taken to jail. That's kind of worst case scenario. You could be written a ticket, or if they're feeling generous, you might get a warning. Or if it's me that caught you, you might get to sit through an impromptu safety program, which I have done.
That sounds a lot better than being in jail.
That is true, yes. Because a lot of times people just, they don't know. So that was, you know, under my discretion of how I handled that. And case in point is that we talk about photographers. They're the biggest violator of this. And, you know, one day when I was on patrol in Valley one day, seen a photographer. They were sitting on the tracks, nowhere near a crossing. He was taking a picture of somebody sitting on the rails, and guess what's coming from the south? A train. So I yell at them, we get them off the tracks, we'll let the train go by, and then we had a little discussion about why that wasn't safe and why it was illegal. Because we see that stuff on social media all the time, and don't be getting your pictures taken on the railroad tracks. Because now that's evidence, and if they want to come after and prosecute you, well, here's the picture. The prosecution arrests. So taking shortcuts, because a lot of people will take the tracks as a shortcut to get to where they're going. So tracks are not walking paths, places to ride your four-wheeler, your bicycle, your motorcycle, or if, you know, we get lucky enough, snowmobiles. And so we talk about, again, distracted pedestrians. What's a big thing that makes them distracted?
Phones.
Phones or
Music.
earbuds, earphones.
Any kind of electronic.
Yep. And that's where a lot of people have been hit and killed in trespassing incidents, because somebody's walking down the tracks and they are walking away from the direction, or they're going in the same direction the train's coming from. So the train's coming up from behind them and they don't hear it. But I will mention though that a video that we talk about in our law enforcement class, there's a video we show. An officer is pursuing a subject on railroad property. He's got a warrant, or he's trying to arrest him. So they're going down the railroad tracks. In the background, they show his body cam footage, and you can hear the horn in the background. It's two tracks, so the officer's thinking of, or just, he's got tunnel vision, he's focused on the guy, and next thing you know, his camera goes toppling and in the grass. And he lived. The locomotive caught him on the corner. He was on the edge of the ties. The kid got away. They knew who he was. But luckily he lived to see another day. But some guys are not so lucky in that. So that's probably the biggest thing that train crews, if you know anybody that's ever worked for the railroad, the scariest moment that they will ever tell you is if they see people on the tracks, and they can blow the horn all they want, they can scream out the window. And it's kind of like that last split second, you know, you get that sensation something's behind you, And they say, yeah, they just turned around and looked, and by then it was too late. So, kinda gotta think about those train crews a little bit. So pedestrians, where do you cross? At any designated road crossing where there may be a sidewalk, or if there's an overpass for grade separation. But typically around here, we've just got all the, at the road crossing. That is the legal place to cross, even if there's not a sidewalk there, cross there on the roads. Objects in trains, so, a lot of people like to put stuff on the rail and let the train run over them, even something as small as a coin. But if you're at a point where you can put that coin on the rail, you're trespassing. And something as small as a coin can shoot back at you just like the bullet out of a gun. Believe it or not, if it hits it just right, it can do that. So, not that it's going to derail the train, but some people think, oh, well, let's find a railroad spike or a tie plate or something else to throw on there and let the train smash into it. Not a good thing to do. So those are illegal as well. If you see kids doing that around railroad tracks, call it in. Tunnels, bridges, and trestles. Although we don't have a lot of tunnels in Kansas, we got a lot of bridges and trestles. And what does everybody like to do off of bridges in Kansas?
Fish.
Fish. So we've had this happen numerous times. People are on a middle of a railroad bridge fishing. But what are you going to do if a train comes along?
You're gonna join the fish.
So you going to be able to outrun it? Probably not. Okay, we're talking about jumping. Do you know what you're jumping into down there?
You're done.
It's not like jumping into your family swimming pool or the city swimming pool that you just can't see. You don't know how deep it is, and you don't know what's down there. And when we've had a lot of rain, everything from upstream washes downstream, and you get trees, and who knows what down there. And if you value your life and your health, I wouldn't want to get impaled on something after jumping into that. So, but there's just not room enough for the people on the trains. So that's why you got to stay off those. So again, you're trespassing. Trains can move without warning, so we see this a lot when we have a train that's blocking a crossing, and that happens periodically. Sometimes it's not the fault of the crew. Sometimes they have a mechanical issue that causes them to stop, or other problems that may have come about. But you see people crawling through a car or under a car at a train that's blocking a crossing. Report that, please. Of course, you got kids standing too close, kids trying to crawl under the train, and that's where a lot of people have ended up losing arms or legs or being killed. The train starts to move all of a sudden, and they can't get out from it fast enough. And people trying to climb on cars, and if you've ever seen a train start from a stop, it makes a lot of noise, and it's very abrupt. So he's not going to be prepared that he's going to fall off, and inevitably you end up under the wheel somehow. You don't know.